Good evening, everyone. Calling the February 25th Norfolk School Committee meeting to order. Start by reading the mission statement. The Norfolk Public Schools offers a safe, joyful, and challenging learning environment that meets the needs of our diverse students. Through school, family, and community partnerships, we provide an education that inspires lifelong learners and cultivates caring and productive citizens of our ever-changing world. Can I have a roll call, please?
Peter Schwalbe.
Grace Lockhead. Medora Champagne.
Lisa Sheldon.
Ingrid Alardi.
Victoria Saldana.
Erin Boone.
All right, we'll start with public comment. No one has signed up. Did anyone want to speak tonight? No. Moving on to correspondence, and there is none. So moving to the chair report. We have another gift from the Norfolk PTO in the amount of $1,077.38. And that's for the box program. And that's the before school program. Both my kids did that. That's a huge hit. So I would be looking for a motion to accept this gift.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion?
Thank you to the PTO. Thank you.
Thanks very much again. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so the next exhibit in your packet, last time we met, Peter had spoke and had asked a few questions for us to consider and asked that we discuss them in a following meeting. He asked what the district's goals were and what does good look like for Norfolk from an academic standpoint. He asked questions about setting aspirational goals around our academic standing within our cohort group. Like in X years, we aspire for Norfolk to be within the top X of our cohort. In our performance reporting, can we begin to break out meets from exceeds expectations? And can we set goals around these categories? Can we look at the time spent on average per week on core ELA and math instruction versus other topics? Can we give more time to math and ELA instructions? For example, can we adjust SEL lessons down from weekly to every 2 weeks and give extra instructional time back to math and ELA? The time of day question, can we ensure that no classes that have intense ELA or math come at the end of the day? Can we ensure these core lessons are taught when students' minds are at their freshest and most active states? So I included these in the packet to discuss with if it's okay with everyone here. I think these topics might be best addressed after we go through the baselines and benchmarks so we have context around it. Would that work for people?
Sure.
Okay. And then Peter had also submitted some questions around the new health standards, and that is not on the agenda for tonight. We'll have more information on that for our March meeting, and we can include those questions at that time. I know you were in correspondence with Desi, so if you want to provide a brief summary of anything you heard.
Sure. The committee had asked if I would explore with Desi what the requirements were in terms of implementing the CPH, the Comprehensive Health and Physical Education Frameworks. And I had previously reached out a number of times and received responses that were less clear than what the committee was seeking. So I did have a meeting with Beth Williams-Brault regarding the frameworks, and let me just, I believe I shared a summary of that conversation. I had my notes with me. But basically what she has said is that the comprehensive health frameworks are considered just see if I have it, what she said was state laws, general law, chapter 71, section 1, and general law, chapter 71, section 3 require all public schools to teach health education and physical education, but school districts do have discretion to determine how the CHPE framework is implemented at the local level, including what curriculum and materials they will use. She said that DESE is strongly committed to valuing all students throughout the Commonwealth and centering those who have been historically marginalized. The CHPE framework, along with all mass curriculum frameworks, are considered evidence-based best practice guidance documents for school districts. Since Massachusetts is a local control state, individual school districts have discretion to make decisions about how these standards are implemented. She did indicate that the Department of Ed strongly encourages all districts to adopt and implement the health frameworks as they are written. She also said if school districts are making different decisions around the curriculum, that committees should be aware and thoughtful about the Mass state laws that prohibit discrimination in schools on the basis of race, color, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, religion, disability, age, genetic information, active military veteran status, marital status, familial status, pregnancy or pregnancy-related condition, homelessness, ancestry, ethnic background, national origin, or any other category protected by state and federal law. Which is also consistent with the district policy. So in making any curriculum decisions or making choices not to implement, we have to be mindful of making sure, or school committees have, it's incumbent for school committees to make sure that those decisions don't result in discrimination against any particular group. That was the information that she shared with me, and I think we'll discuss further at the next meeting. Sound good?
Appreciate you continuing to follow up, trying to get the answer.
Sure.
And so I will hand it over to you.
All right. The first thing in your packet tonight is from our Tony Davis, who is our director of the SAC program. I think you probably remember earlier in the year we talked about how we have experienced increasing demand commensurate with our growth in enrollment and more families seeking after-school and before-school care. SAC has been at capacity for a number of years, so whereas 6 or 7 years ago you could call, sign up, and get a slot in the SAC program, we have been operating on a wait list for a number of years, and the wait list isn't moving. Families that enter the program tend to stay with the program. It's an excellent program, but it's not creating space for new families moving in. So Tony and I have been looking at that over the course of the year and really trying to identify ways we could potentially expand the program and offer more spots. As I shared before, the biggest limitation for us is the requirements for staffing and staffing student ratios for a publicly operated program. A publicly operated program has different guidelines than a private YMCA or other program might. So what Tony has been observing and looking at the data, we have quite a few families in the program currently that pick students up early. They don't need till 6 o'clock care. They might be coming in from a train or teaching in another district, and they just need a bridge or care for a certain period of time before they can get here to pick up the kids. She's seeing that quite a few families have that pattern of picking up at 4:30 or 5 o'clock every day. And what she is suggesting is that we consider piloting a program next year, an alternate program that would provide care just till 4:30. We would offer it first to existing families, because if families that are in the program currently choose to take the shorter hours, we'd be opening full slots in the SAC program for families that might need more. And so she wants to offer and pilot this shorter program that would provide after-school care from SAC, from school dismissal till 4:30 each day, and is recommending opening 13 slots at each building, which is 26. We have, with changes she made this year, eliminated the morning wait list. This will make a big dent in the afternoon wait list. Reluctant to overpromise, because that for 13 students we need a staff person. So she would have to hire 2 additional staff. We want to try that. If it's successful and we can expand as the year goes on, would love to do that. But we think this will really help bring more families in that have been waiting for program access. Per the school committee policy, she would have to recommend, you have to approve the rate. So Tony is recommending that the shorter program, part-time program, be $12.50 per afternoon. Full-time participants currently are charged $21 with a sibling discount of $19. So I'm looking for a motion from the committee to approve the rate for this new program so that Tony can advertise it and begin to work on staffing and numbers for next year.
I move to approve the rate as proposed by Tony Davis Squires for the new SAC pilot program.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
I will say, just as a parent, when I pick up at 5:30, my child is often the last one there. So
I think this will really meet the
I think
needs
this
of a lot
will
of
be really
families.
interesting to see, and I think it's a great idea, so thank you.
So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second tonight, we have Dr. Anna Tupper and Jill Levy, our lead preschool teacher, here to present the preschool program options and recommended rates and fees for next year. Again, our preschool lottery and opens soon, so they want to know what the rates will be for our families.
Hopefully it's opening tomorrow. Anyway, welcome. Thank you for having us tonight. We appreciate it. Before we get started, I just want to introduce Jill Levy. Jill is in her first year as our lead preschool teacher, so if you recall last year, Alicia Whitehead has been in the position for many years, and now Jill is taking over the responsibility, and she's doing a fantastic job with it. So this is Jill. We have two different documents in the folder today. One is a narrative that kind of describes the 5 types of programming that we offer our preschool students in Norfolk, and the other is just an overview of the programming that also includes the tuition rates. So what I'm going to do is just walk through that narrative and explain programming. As many of you know, preschool programming is founded under special education law. So we have the obligation to identify children by the age of 3 if we feel like they have an educational disability. So our programming is really founded on the needs of our special education students. And we offer 2 types of programming. We offer programming for typically developing students and for students with special needs. So that's an integrated program. And then we also offer a non-integrated program for special education students who require more time and direct instruction with regard to the goals and objectives on their IEP. So in terms of the integrated program, we offer 5 classrooms. We have 2 programs for 3-year-olds. We have a 2-day program on Tuesday, Thursday. That's a half-day program. And we have a 3-day program on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We also offer 3 other options for 4-year-olds. We have what we call a hybrid program, which is a 2-day full-day program and a 3-day half-day program. And then we have a 5-day half-day program, and then we have a 4.5-day full-day program. So students come 4 days full day, and then they come on Friday for half a day. All students dismiss at Friday at noontime, 11:30 this year. And then we have our IEP meetings on Friday afternoons for students. In terms of special education programming, in our 3-day programs, students stay an additional hour a day to receive direct instruction. For our hybrid program, students stay an additional 2 half-day afternoons. For a 4-day half-day program, students stay an additional afternoon. And then for our full day, we have a full-day sub-separate program for students with more moderate or higher needs. So really, the only change that we're recommending for next year is that we extend all integrated preschool programs by half an hour. So instead of dismissing at 11:30, they're going to dismiss at 12 o'clock. This impacts tuition rates by 30 minutes. So we typically charge $6.77 an hour. We have not proposed a change for a few years, but we kept that rate the same for next year. And so you can see the tuition rates on this form right here. And so really, that's all. Is there anything else that you want to add? I don't mean to put you on the spot. But
No.
Yeah, okay.
But all the preschool teachers wanted to add the
Yeah.
additional half hour. We feel that that time is really vital for the kids.
Yeah.
So that comes from the recommendation of the preschool team.
And Anna, just to clarify, the tuition rates have been increased to reflect the additional half-hour time
They have.
based on the past rate.
Right. So before we, they were rated, based on the 2.5 hours. Now they're going to be increased because it's a 3-hour. For most, the half-day programs, it will be 3 hours, not 2.5 hours. Yes. So it reflects the additional half hour. Yeah. Any questions? Anyone?
Are these still comparable, the rates with our surrounding towns, if we haven't increased them in a little
Yeah,
bit?
we're in the middle in terms of preschool rates. When we've looked in the past, we definitely fall in the middle, and we're comparable to our regional partners. So, yeah.
Is that something you think you'll look at soon? I mean, it's such a great program. It's certainly,
It is, yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, we can definitely take a look at it again. I feel like we looked at it last year and looked at the comparison rates.
We did. We adjusted 2
Yep.
years ago. Last year opted not to because we were still in the middle. I do think next year would make sense. You know, probably every 3 years, it's
Every
good to
3
just do a
years,
market
yeah.
correction. So I definitely think we would want to look at it again next year. I think given that we're increasing the rate because we're increasing time, this year I think we want to try to keep it consistent, and then next year maybe relook at adjusting.
There's a slight increase.
So they need a motion from the committee to approve the tuition rates for the preschool program for 25-26.
I move to approve the tuition rates for the preschool program for the 25-26 school year.
I'll second.
Any further discussion on that? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank
We'd love to
you.
have you down at the preschool if you want to.
It's a really fun place to go.
I have to get my little plug in. All right.
Thank you so much. All right, next we have the budget update. So the budget subcommittee wanted to update the committee of where we are in the process of preparing a draft budget for the public hearing scheduled for March 12th. As typical, the first stage of our process is Miriam works to compute and calculate what the cost of rolling existing staff over from this year into next year is, accommodating the collective bargaining cost of living increases as well as steps and lane changes. We work on the expense side, and all department heads work on their expense budgets. We meet, we look through those, we make reductions, and then we prepare a proposed budget to bring to the subcommittee to review. Just as the committee is aware, last year we used several sources of one-time funds to offset growing special education costs. We used funding from the District Stabilization Fund as well as a tuition account that had, I think, close to $100,000 for students that had been tuitioned into the district. Those funds were one-time funds, so we had a deficit in special education last year that continues because those one-time funds have been exhausted. As a result, a level service budget for us, just bringing over the staff and maintaining the current, expense accounts, came out to be about 10.7%. Recognizing that financial picture in the town is not great right now, and a lot of departments have difficult budgets ahead of them to try to balance within the revenue available. The subcommittee has been working really hard to identify reductions that we could make while prioritizing maintaining strong instruction in the classroom, protecting teaching positions to the best of our ability, and prioritizing academic growth. That said, we had, in the first round of budget reductions, looked at a couple of things. As we are aware, we have a space crisis at H. Olive Day. We don't have any additional classrooms. We do need, based on current enrollment, ideally 9 second grades next year in order to keep class size under the class size policy limit. We have 8 currently. We don't have another classroom. So we are going to be probably recommending the school committee consider lifting the maximum class size cap for next year in order for us to accommodate the students that we have. So that would mean that we would not be adding a teacher as we typically would based on the numbers. But again, given the space, we don't have a space to put that classroom. So we are also recommending, we have a retirement up at the Freeman Kennedy School. We are recommending not refilling that position, which will increase class size in one of the either 3rd or 4th grade. We're still working through that. That would be under the policy limit, but it would be higher than it is currently. We have some changes within the special education department. So we have some students exiting. We have some students and families moving. So we are looking at reducing 3 paraprofessional positions. Those are not bodies that we are pink slipping or letting people go. We have open positions now that aren't filled, and every summer, we're very lucky in Norfolk, a lot of our paraprofessional staff are licensed certified teachers who are, as they complete their license, looking for teaching positions. So there is natural attrition, but we believe we can eliminate 3 positions based on changes in the department and student needs. We made pretty drastic reductions to supply accounts and technology subscriptions. I think that teachers are working with the PTO to try to fund some of the supplemental technology programs, not core instruction, but supplemental programs through the teacher grant process. We have eliminated all capital expenditures in the budget. We have a copier that is desperately needing replacement, and we had scheduled $30,000 of laptop replacements because those the devices are aging past 6 years, so they're on their kind of last legs. But we did cut those out of the budget. May try to pursue some capital funding in the fall through the regular capital process for laptops. We were hoping to see a reduction in out-of-district tuitions, so we had budgeted for that, and we've also been actively working with the town to try to see if there was a way that we could share HR services. Our HR director is retiring, and we were looking to see if there was a possibility of sharing that position with the town. Since we prepared this budget, a few things have changed. So we have not been able to reduce the out-of-district tuitions as we had hoped, and the town has recently informed us that they are not in a position where they think that a shared HR model will work at this time. So the budget subcommittee met again because that added cost, and we had to find further reductions in order to try to balance the budget. So one of the things that we are talking about is offering an early retirement incentive. We did that once before back in 2020. An early retirement incentive would only be possible if we do receive funding from the state to offset the costs that we've absorbed this year, the $104 reimbursement, if that is authorized again and we have funding available at the end of the fiscal year. Right now, I think at the last budget presentation, Miriam talked about how we're running in a budget deficit. We expect that funding will be approved through the state budget process, and if that happens, then we could potentially end this year with some surplus. It would allow the district to use any available surplus funds at the end of this year as an incentive for retirement. And what we see is savings if we have a teacher that's exiting at the top of the salary schedule. We typically hire somebody lower on the salary schedule. We budget like a master's 5. There's generally about $30,000 of savings. So we've talked about trying to look at that to see if that's the way that we could generate some savings for next year. I've been talking with the budget subcommittee about it. Process-wise, if the committee is interested in pursuing that, I could continue to work on terms with the budget subcommittee, and then it would be collectively bargained with the Teachers Association. Once we get through that process, the final agreement would come back to the full committee to review and approve. So I don't know if I did want to see if anyone had any concerns about moving forward with kind of exploring that and negotiating with the teachers. Again, it wouldn't be approved until we bring the final recommendation to the full school committee. But we think it's worthy of exploration at this point. Any concerns on that?
No concerns. I mean, I know it can be a creative way to try to find some savings. I mean, historically, it worked. It worked out in the past when we've done it. I just think that giving it proper lead time and making sure everyone's clear that it's contingent on some other sources of funding are, important.
Yeah. And we'll put that right into the. I know other districts, including KP, I think, are looking at that similarly at this point. So.
I'm sorry, Medora, did you say the last time it did work out? Or
it did. We did generate a few some savings.
Ingrid, logistically, how do you, I just don't know how it works. If you put it out there, what if 20 teachers said yes?
So that is what we negotiate in terms of the proposal that we put forward, but it would be limited based on available funds.
Okay.
So we would only be able to accept individuals into it as funds allow.
Okay.
So that would be part of the agreement. So that is one thing we are looking at. We've also looked at some other creative ways to try to bring those costs down. Additionally, the budget subcommittee, in looking at the data and the district performance, wanted to try to strategize around ways to bring back some academic support that has been lost over the past few years, while keeping the budget within the 4.75. So we have made some additional adjustments that we'll bring forward and we'll talk about. We're still working through them with the goal of adding back at least a 1.0 math paraprofessional. When we get into the baseline data, you'll see our district's made big gains in mathematics. We are close to the top of our comparison group, but 5th and 6th grade have very complex math concepts introduced at those grade levels, and that is where we're finding we have more students that require support services than we're able to provide with the existing model. So we are hoping to be able to add that academic support back and still balance that 4.75, just working through a few other potential areas of reduction. Peter, did I leave anything out, or?
I didn't. I wanted to ask with the retirement incentive, the timing of that in association to the public hearing and vote.
Well, I'm hoping, if the committee is comfortable with us moving forward with negotiating with the Teachers Association, ideally we'd have a final proposal to bring forward for the committee to consider in March, because the more time we can give people to consider their plans and more notice time they have to inform the district if they're interested in participating, the better for everybody. If the committee's comfortable, the next step would be to schedule a budget subcommittee to review the terms of the proposed agreement. If we're all on the same page, work with the union to try to negotiate something prior to the next school committee meeting. If not, we may have to schedule a special school committee meeting to consider the retirement incentive. Would like to try to, if we are moving forward, would like to try to offer it in March and have people be able to make final decisions early May once we know really what the end of year funding is going to look like. Sound good?
Would this be for all teachers and staff, or lead teachers only, or specialists as well?
So it would be, if we opened an early retirement incentive, it would be available to any member of the collective bargaining agreement, any unit member, which covers classroom teachers, specialists, therapists, any member of the bargaining agreement. In the past, we had requirements like teachers had to have worked at least 10 years for the district, and there's other criteria that we would consider. Again, it would be depending on the available funding allowed. We would approve based on what we project to have for savings. We'd have timelines. Once someone would be accepted, they would have to sign an irrevocable agreement guaranteeing that they're retiring no later than June 30th. So there's terms that we would have to negotiate, but that's sort of the gist of it. It would be open to any unit member.
And then, but the plan would be to rehire all those positions. The only
Yes.
teacher we're not refilling is the retirement.
Is one retirement, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, these would be budgeted positions in the district that we would potentially realize savings because the people in those positions are at a higher salary rate than the people that'd be hired to replace. But they would all be filled. They're not positions subject to elimination.
That makes sense. Sounds like that.
I can't recall offhand on the 2 classrooms where we would increment the size. It was by 1 student each.
Yeah, so yes, at first grade, if we don't add a teacher, the maximum class size policy limit is 21. Based on our current enrollment, we will have some classes at 22. Again, we do have, it could be all first grade classes at 22 because we do have students that enroll. In the district, we have more entry over the summer into kindergarten and first grade than we do typically in other grades as families move in to start their children in the district. But yes, we would anticipate that it would be over because we'd have 8 classes that they would be over by 1 student.
And it's the same for the other class, but it's still...
Yeah, the other grade, if we reduce or we don't fill a retirement, there would be 1 other grade level with higher class sizes, but they would be within the policy limit. The policy limit for grades 3 to 6 is 25. They would not be at 25. We'd probably be looking at class sizes of 23, potentially 1 or 2 classes of 24.
Kindergarten enrollment has opened?
Kindergarten enrollment is opened. We are watching that closely. I think as of yesterday, it was at about 115. We're projecting about 140. We typically get 10 to 15 students over the summer. It's trending a little bit under where we expected. However, we do have quite a few families who delayed entering kindergarten this year. I think it was 6 when I presented to the committee last time that delayed entrance because they were concerned about the enrollment size based on students coming in from the shelter. They were worried about class size. I think we do think there are some families waiting to see what happens with that prior to enrolling.
My only other question was, I think, are we missing Exhibit 4, or?
I was in my packet, but I thought you guys were not. So if you're missing Exhibit 4, I will send it around and make sure it gets added to the packet. It was in there, but I think Adrian took it out because we had another budget meeting. But we didn't revise it, so I will make sure that you have it.
No worries.
I do like the idea a lot of adding the math specialist. I know it's hard in budget constraints, but when we're talking about increasing class sizes, and it is really important, I think, so I like that you guys looked at that. The second grade going up to 22 kids, do you think any additional support will be needed in those classrooms, or do you think one student not ideal but okay?
I think we're going to have to look at what it looks like. I mean, if we had significant enrollment over the summer and we were looking at 23 in classes, then we might need to consider that. I think we would probably, if it's only 1 or 2 classes that are at 22, we might be able to redirect some of the current support to provide more support if needed to those rooms. So I think it really depends on what happens with enrollment at that grade level.
I know at least for kindergarten, the aides in the classroom make such a difference there, and I know we can't do that for every classroom, but classes that are maybe approaching a certain size, I know we're strapped financially to do that, but
and I think it's a little bit easier at second grade, where kids have some preliminary basic skills in reading, are a little bit more independent than it would be at kindergarten. But I think we'd really have to watch again, if it's only 1 or 2 classes that are 1 above, then I think we could redirect and provide additional support with the resources we have. But if that picture changes a lot, we might have to rethink that. Okay. So we will be prepared with a full budget to present to you at the public hearing on March 12th. So we'll present the budget and then have further discussion at that time. And we will have finalized recommendations for there.
will we see it before?
Yep, we will send it out in advance of the meeting.
And we could just contact you if we have a question or
Absolutely.
unclear on something? Okay.
Yep. Sound good? Any other questions? Great. All right, I'll turn it to Vicki, who's going to give an update on the LPAC and the math program review.
Sure. So I just wanted to give you a quick update on our what's been happening with the LPAC. Just to kind of give a brief overview, about 2 years ago, the assistant superintendents of Rentham, Plainville, and myself, we applied for a Title III grant, which focused on enhancing programming for English learner families and their students. And one of the areas we kind of identified that would benefit all of our districts, all 4 districts, is to see if we can start an LPAC group, because we all have rising numbers in how many L families we have moving into the district. So the English Learner Parent Advisory Council we had our second meeting of this year, which is our 5th meeting since last year. We're rotating where it's located through all the different towns, just to kind of make sure that everybody has access in all the towns, that parents can kind of participate. So the first one was held in Norfolk, and this one was held at Broderick Elementary School in Rentham. Currently, because we're still trying to kind of figure out how to manage a program like this through 3 different towns, and how do we get enough kind of participation, and kind of what would be, how can we best meet the needs of our families in the 3 different towns. It is really led more heavily by assistant superintendents, so we kind of do the primary planning for it. We send out all the information and try to kind of recruit interest. So one of the things that we did notice that we have had families come this year that we haven't seen last year, so that was encouraging. So I'm hoping that word is kind of spreading, and more families will be able to participate. Basically, when you have a full functioning LPAC, it's kind of very similar to the PTO and CPAC. It really helps schools and districts kind of have a better pulse on like how we can best support our LPAC families, like what are some issues that they have, kind of bridge that communication between schools and our families. So one of the things that I shared with you in the packet is just our agenda for meeting 2, just to give you kind of an idea of what the meetings look like. And we have tried like various structures. We have done blended meetings where we've done virtual and in person. And we this last meeting we had actually a good number of families that came to both. They came in person and we had some that joined us online. We provide interpreters as needed for our families too, to make sure that everybody's able to engage. And we took a survey last year. We had a couple parents that kind of helped us determine like what would be an interest of topic for families and how can we support them. So this agenda was really driven by that. So one of the things that families requested was having some tips on how to integrate into an American society if you newly moved here from another country, you know, so like customs are different, you know, and kind of like social norms. So we had the Rentham School psychologist, she came and she did a presentation from parents on forming friendships and belonging. And it really ensued a great conversation amongst families. And it was one of those meetings that just kind of took a life on its own, which is always what you want. So you, like, it's not like me standing at the front, you know what I mean, kind of presenting. And there was some really rich discussion that kind of occurred from that. So we really appreciate Mrs. Duffy being able to give us her time and to be able to kind of present that information to the parents. It was really helpful. The other group that came to us, which were super excited, and I actually included their flyer, is there was some high school students from King Philip that started a group for their DECA competition, and basically on bringing literacy, financial literacy to high school students. And it was there was 2 students that presented, and they really give information around budget and savings, and you know how to open like a checking account, and what does a credit card interest really mean. And it is a fantastic program. They did such a great job. They're actually going to a competition, to a state competition pretty soon, to kind of present this program that they started. And the way it connected to our families is that a lot of times when students are first-generation immigrants, or they themselves are first-generation immigrants, like that is something that they're sometimes left to navigate. So this is like a really great support for students to be able to learn like how our financial system kind of works, and to set them up, because students, which they talked about how they've met students who have a lot of after-school jobs, you know, and kind of like how do you manage the money that's coming in. So I was really excited. It was the first time I've heard about it. So, and they did such an amazing job, and it seems like such a great like area to focus on, and like very highly needed in our times, I think, for everybody. But you know, so our next meeting is actually going to be at the end of April. We'll be sending out flyers pretty soon. It's going to be held in Plainville, this location. We're actually going to shift a little bit the focus from another feedback that we've had, and invite families to bring their children, and maybe do like, if hopefully it'll be a nice day, we can do like a playground meet and greet, because I think that one of the feedbacks that strongly came through our survey and kind of conversations, that families are really looking for opportunities to make connections with each other. So this is kind of where we are with our LPAC. Any questions? Great. Just help spreading the word.
Are these meetings strictly for English language learning families and children, or are English-speaking families also joining, and are they making connections like across
so just
language barriers?
Just like the CPAC, like everybody's welcome, you know, but I think that the focus area is to really support our English learner families, because they have specific topics and needs that, you know, but anybody is welcome to come.
Yeah, they're all open meetings.
Yeah, I just didn't know if like general public was aware of it, and there are a lot of families that want to meet with, newcomers, and
Right.
it might be a nice venue or place for people to be able to do so.
We usually advertise in Wednesday's Words is how we send out, and then we send like translated flyers to certain families that more backpack, you know what I mean, to be approached, but usually it's open to everybody, but we can.
Make sure that we put the
we can
meetings
make sure
in
that
the agenda in the
yeah.
Wednesday words.
And maybe stress that it's
Open.
since it's new, like kind of, that might be a great suggestion for us to kind of emphasize that it's open to everybody.
Yeah, I was riffing off the forming friendships and belonging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's great, especially for the spring one, if kids are going to be brought, like it might be nice for.
nice too, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great suggestion.
Next on the agenda is Vicki to talk about the update on the maths program review. So I'll let you walk through that.
So as you know, we're in the midst of our math review. We have, I spoke a little bit in the beginning of the year, but just to give you a quick recap, we have about 11 members on our math committee. It's very similar to how we ran the ELA committee. We have a representative from each grade level. We have special ed representation. We have administrators, and our math specialists are part of the team. And we've been charged to assess the effectiveness of our existing program, to identify strengths and areas for improvement, to ultimately ensure that our math curriculum provides all students with the rigorous, engaging learning experience that we want them to have. So we started off the committee, we crafted a vision of what we kind of think that the optimal math environment and learning would look like what is our wish for all our children as they go through the Norfolk Public Schools and move on to their future endeavors. I included the vision at the end, but basically Norfolk Public Schools are committed to developing all student mathematical understanding by creating equitable, relevant, and engaging learning experience. Students will learn to become lifelong problem solvers who sustain a growth mindset, collaborate, and effectively apply and communicate their thinking in a variety of ways. Our students will have access to high-quality instruction that leverages cultural knowledge and lived experiences, challenging and coherent content in a learning environment where each student receives the support they need to succeed in mathematics. So that's kind of like our hope and, vision for all our kiddos. So where we are, after that, we conducted a SWOT analysis, which is assessing our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That included us looking and disaggregating about 5 years' worth of data. We looked at our district benchmarks, our MCAS scores, just to kind of look for those, we took a deep dive into trends, kind of what we saw in terms of how students are performing, really do a strong gap analysis. We also surveyed families to kind of assess how their experiences with the current program is, what are some challenges that they've had, what are some things that really work well right now that we want to make sure that we preserve. And we also assessed our teachers, and we kind of asked a lot of questions around how resources are working for them, how much supplementing they have to do, again, identify what are their challenges, and also kind of gathering some feedback in terms of what would they like to see in a strong mathematical program. And I included a summary for you of what the survey results are, which I believe is your exhibit. I'm sorry, I'm trying to scroll through here. The SWOT analysis summary. So as you can see that the staff survey, we had over 90% response rate. So teachers appreciate the structure and digital resources available, but feel the curriculum lacks developmental appropriateness in some areas and does not provide enough challenging and spiraling. There's a strong desire for more hands-on learning, engaging warm-ups, differentiated instruction. So one of the things that we have discovered, thank you very much, my notes didn't print for one of the other presentations, so I was just a little bit so. So one of the things that we are kind of looking that we feel like our current curriculum lacks is really giving students enough time to kind of live in the conceptual world and in where they are really having an opportunity to understand why mathematics works the way it does. So instead of rushing to the procedural. So this is an area we've had to supplement quite heavily, but it would be great to have a program that has that built in, and really the use of hands-on manipulatives and really teaching students how to demonstrate their thinking, and really focusing on those deep problem-solving skills, because you can teach the kids like the different, this is how you do addition, subtraction, decimals, but what we really want to achieve is to teach kids how to work through a problem that they do not know an answer to. So because there's no way that we can expose them to every single scenario they're going to face in their mathematical journey. So that's what we're looking to really, and that takes, perseverance, and you want to teach them have toolbox, that is rich with them being able to visually display word problems, and be able to solve through it. So when they hit middle school and high school, they have that practice. So that's where we're kind of looking for a program that will systematically, K through 6, will build those skills for our students. So so after we conducted a SWOT analysis, we kind of looked at everybody's feedback. What are the priorities that parents identified? So the parents talked about how homework sometimes was inconsistent, depending on which grade level. A lot of parents asked for more support in being able to support their children at home, So right now there's programs that have videos for parents and just kind of a breakdown of we're learning about this concept. This is how you can, this is what the student has learned. This is how to kind of help support their homework. So taking all their feedback and our data analysis, we created a rubric of our kind of key things that we really want to look for in our program. And I included the rubric in your packet too. And as you can see, we divided them into different categories like organization, student engagement, teacher, is ability of use. So this way, when we are evaluating programs, we can kind of see what are the strengths of the programs we're looking at, what are some areas that maybe are not represented. No program is going to have all threes because unfortunately such a thing doesn't exist. But we're really looking for a program that will best meet our needs, and then we can kind of support as we do with everything else, the areas that maybe were not as strong, So right now we're in a process of evaluating some programs. We're using the Curate as our baseline, which is their DESE curriculum review by teachers. Companies have to submit their programs to the state. The state has a panel of teachers and administrators and educators from all different walks and towns and demographics, and they use their own rubric, which is not very different from ours, to evaluate programs, and then they kind of give a rating. So we kind of started there just to help us eliminate programs that maybe don't have a strong K through 6, you know what I mean? They're really strong at K1, but then they kind of fall apart in 3, 4, for example, So we have identified a couple of programs now. We're in the process of meeting with the representatives using a rubric. We got some samples in, so this is very exciting. We're actually unpacking them today. So, and we're hoping that at the end of this process to eliminate, have it narrowed down to 2 programs. And like we did with the ELA, we'll then ask the rest of our educators to try out a few lessons from the program. So they'll be given some time to kind of unpack it, look at the platform, and then at the end of this process, we'll send a survey to teachers, kind of using the same checklist, and see what people feel would be the best program for us to adopt. At that point, we'll bring it to the school committee for you to review, but I think last year, and we'll do the same thing this year, as well, once we get the final 2 programs, I'll let you know what it is. So if you're interested, we'll offer it to parents. They can take a look too, Any questions about the math review?
If you mentioned it, I apologize, but just rough timeline, where do you see it?
Right, that's great. So right now, I'm hoping to be able to bring it to the May school committee for you to vote on. So I have it slated that I'm hoping to have the 2 programs identified by mid-March, so teachers can start looking at it. And then it takes about a month for us to kind of go through that process. And then I negotiate with the vendors and that takes some time. So I'm hoping to have like a full package ready for you in May. So you'll see like the price line and what is included, and kind of like more information about the program.
So your goal would be that we would start implementing it for the next fall?
The fall, yes. So we are, I have a professional development committee that is going to start meeting actually Thursday. And one of the tasks we have is to look at our days and plan out how the implementation process is going to be best presented for our schools. And also I'm working with our math specialist team. They are the coaches in planning how we are going to support the teachers in bringing in the new program. We have a little bit of a leverage because we are only going to be in our second year of our ELA program. So we really have to be conscientious and make sure that teachers are able to, lift both, but I think that we have a good plan for that. We work closely with teachers. I meet with them at the end of the school year to really gather feedback so we can kind of have a collective plan on how we're going to implement a math program while continuing to unpack our ELA program.
Where is this in the budget? Is there a placeholder, or do we feel confident in that placeholder?
So that's one of the things that we looked at. So we anticipate the math program coming in around between $225 and $250. We had budgeted initially the full cost for the math program, and we are now looking at doing something similar to what we did with ELA, splitting the cost. Most vendors will allow you to budget and pay the cost of the program over 2 years. So now we have budgeted for the half of the payment in the budget with the intent of spreading the cost over 2 years. We don't have another major adoption immediately following. We do have to look at science next, but we need to give our staff some breathing time as well. So.
And that is in the budget, though?
Half the cost of the math program is in the budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there consideration to do a capital
We
item,
could
or-
consider that, or we can spread it over the 2 years. I think we will have to really think about what we're bringing forward to capital, because we also cut out all of the laptop replacements and the technology. So once we have a sense of what the town has available for capital funds, I think the committee can weigh in on what makes the most sense to bring forward.
I like the parent support element you're looking at, because I try and help my son with math, and apparently I do it very differently now, and I think I'm just confusing him, because he's doing it in the boxes, and I've never seen the boxes, and so.
Well,
that'd be
no, it's
helpful.
huge, and one of the programs we're looking at today actually had such a great way of, they were literally was like, dear parent, your child learned this today, and they were like, this is the visual that they use, and this is how we use the visual. It was so well explained, so I think they've come a long way, what I mean, in being able to do it, and that's, like I said, one of our priorities. So we were even narrowing down to which ones we wanted to look more closely. That was a big component, because
We hear a lot of parents saying, I try to help him, my child says, that's not how my teacher does it. So it's a very common
I have the high schooler help the elementary student farm it out, because
There you
he
go.
learned that way. Yeah.
Any other questions on the math review? Okay. All right. Every year for the school committee, we, either in January or February, we present the district benchmark and baseline report. We started doing that probably, it was back in 2013, because we do an MCAS presentation in December, and that gives you a sense of how our students are progressing compared to other districts and the state as far as the MCAS test. But we also recognize that MCAS is only one snapshot of educational quality. And so years ago, we worked with the committee to try to identify what are other metrics that you would be looking for to be able to evaluate how our district is performing as a whole, beyond a single snapshot score. So there are a lot of different things that we talked about. One, things like teacher retention, licensure, experience, qualifications of teachers, discipline rates, school climate, school culture, other metrics of educational performance. So our district baseline reports for ELA and math. So we've been for probably 10 years compiling this report every year. A couple of years ago, we presented the equity report, and the committee asked, how are we going to measure your progress towards some of the goals that you've stated? So we have now included in the baseline report progress in terms of closing achievement gaps among subgroups. So we have a brief presentation, and we'll kind of walk through. The report itself, once we present to the committee, will be available on our website. But it is a lengthy report, so we're going to just go through some of the highlights in the presentation tonight. So the first thing we always share is a picture of the student demographics. So this is our demographic data, and again, the report is for the school year that just passed, so ending in spring of 2024. So this is a picture, a snapshot of our student demographic population. I think important things to note are always changes in new trends. As we've talked about before, the fastest growing populations in Norfolk are English language learners. Back in 2013, when we first started this, we didn't have any students receiving English language instruction and support. That has grown rapidly and has been pretty constant for the last 3 years at about 4.3% of our students. 6.5% of our students speak a second language in the home, but 4.3% are receiving direct instruction for English language learning. The other population that is growing very quickly is our low-income families. In 2019, prior to COVID, about 4.7% of our student body qualified as low income. That has grown steadily from 2019 until 2020-24, with 7.7% of our students being low income. Class size, another metric that we've talked about regularly. Our average class size in Norfolk currently is 20. We have lower class sizes in grades K to 2, consistent with our policy, which looks for lower class sizes in the younger grades, and larger class sizes in grades 3 to 6. So you see more 22, 23 in the upper grades. Average is 20. In Norfolk, we used to have, among all of our comparison communities, we were in the lower end. We had smaller class sizes than many other districts. That is no longer true. We are in the middle to the upper end of class size. So we're higher than most of our comparison communities, but while our class sizes are consistently above the target policy number, they have remained below the maximum class size policy. Special education trends. So students with disabilities comprise 18.1% of our total student body in Norfolk. We have a lower percentage than the state of students with disabilities and most of our comparison communities. The majority of students in Norfolk that are eligible for specialized services are considered low need, meaning they receive the majority of their services in a full inclusion setting. One of the trends that we have seen changing is since 2018, we have seen growth in the percentage of students entering the district that are considered high-need students, and that just means they receive the majority of their services in a substantially separate setting, and they typically receive multiple different types of services. We also have seen differences in the categories, the disability categories students are qualifying for special education under, and we've seen significant growth in the number of students entering or qualifying for services under the autism disability category. Teacher education, 100% of our teachers are licensed in the field that they teach. 90.6% of our teachers have advanced degrees. 52.8% have been teaching in Norfolk for over 10 years. We have the highest teacher retention rate and the second highest, we have a high teacher retention rate, the second highest of all of our comparison communities, with 95.5% of our teachers returning from year to year. We did see that number when you look in the report. We have a slightly lower number for new teachers in their first 3 years, but that is often because in the first 3 years, the district may choose not to renew a contract or bring teachers back or program changes. But when we dove deeply into that data, we are not losing teachers to other neighboring districts. We've only lost one teacher in the last 3 years to another neighboring district. Student attendance, this is something we're proud of. So we have a 95.5% student attendance rate. Again, one of the highest of all of our comparison districts. Following COVID statewide, there has been a significant increase in the number of students missing more than 10 days of school and in the category of chronic absenteeism. So that's a statewide and a national trend. You've probably seen it on the news. We have made progress in lowering that number. So the percentage of students that were falling in the category of chronic absenteeism was 12.5, and we've reduced that down to 6.7 over the past 3 years. We've also decreased the number of students missing more than 10 days from 40.3 to 29.9. So we've made some significant gains in improving attendance overall and reducing that chronic absenteeism. We did look at disproportionality, and we are still continuing to see an overrepresentation of students and families who are low income in the chronically absent category. So we are working on strategies to try to increase outreach and try to remove some of the barriers to improve the attendance for that population. Student discipline. We continue to have very low rates of student suspension. I think, as the committee is probably aware, the student discipline law changed in Massachusetts. Suspension is something that you can only do for very significant charges, weapons charges, drug charges, but we are required to use alternate forms of discipline to keep kids in school for most other kinds of infractions. So rates across the state have come down, but we have also been really looking at our office referral data and the number of students that are sent to the office for behavioral challenges and needs. Freeman Kennedy implemented a PBIS, or a Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Program, called SOARS. That started in the fall of 2023. And H. Olive Day has implemented some school-wide programs, school meetings, Kindness Coin program, again, to try to support and recognize positive behavior and build community. We have been tracking discipline referrals. At the lower grades, K to 2, it's very rare that a child is sent to the office. So we don't have, most discipline is minor and it's handled in the classroom. But we do track that data for Freeman Kennedy. And we have seen a dramatic decline since the implementation of the SOARS program. So in the full report, if you go to the full report, between December and June of 2022, we had 280 plus office referrals for disciplinary behavior. The following year, after implementing SOARS, in the entire year, it went down to 170. This year, between September and March, between September and now, we only have had 69. So a significant improvement in this discipline. Credit to the school, the teachers, and the counselors who've worked really hard on building and reinforcing that program. We also, when we presented the equity audit 2 years ago, we had seen that the students with disabilities and our male students were overrepresented in discipline data. We have closed the gap slightly for students with disabilities and decreased their representation by 8.5% or 8.4%. But we still continue to see an overrepresentation of male students in the disciplinary data and are continuing to work on addressing that. Budget comparison. Our per pupil spending in 2024 was $17,848. We are, in that year, we spent $4,000 below the state average per pupil spend. That is a big jump. Prior to that, it had been about $2,000. The gap between Norfolk spending and the state is increasing. However, I would point out in the report, when you look at it, it used to be just Norfolk and Berkeley that underspent the state, sometimes Plainville. The number of suburban districts that are now underspending the state has increased. I think that's a direct function of additional revenue coming into the state being directed towards urban communities. So many of the grants we've applied for, like the curriculum initiatives, we have been denied because we don't meet the criteria as an underperforming district or a district with high levels of low income. Still, the gap is continuing to grow. We continue to underspend both Plainville and Rentham by about $2,000 per pupil. Vicki's going to talk about some of the academic measures.
Sure. So I wanted just to kind of talk a little bit and give an overview of our benchmark data, but before I kind of get into the data itself, I just wanted to give a little bit of a background. So when we collect our benchmark data, I partnered with our IT specialist a couple of years ago, and we actually built a platform where we source thousands lines of data, and we've created actually an analytics platform where we're able to analyze the data. So we kind of do similar to what MCAS kind of does. So when we say that I'm comparing MCAS and our benchmark data, we're able to do that because me and Raf Sardi were able to partner on that level to be able to build that for our district. It's been, I just want to give them a shout out. It has been such a huge labor of love, because that is often outsourced to by other districts, but it costs thousands of dollars to have other companies come in and do that for you. So I just want to just give you a little bit of credit that it's all the graphs you see. Actually, there was a lot of work that went behind it, and every year we are refining it and kind of looking at how we can pull the data not only by student population, by demographics, you know what I mean, and how we've created platforms for teachers where they can sort data, they color codes, you know what I mean, so they can more easily see what students need support. So the districts use our benchmark assessments as a data point to monitor student progress towards grade level standards and identify areas where additional support is needed. We more heavily rely on this information than for example, MCAS, which does have some really great information as well. But as you know, kids take an MCAS test 1 or 2 days, but our benchmark assessments, kids are assessed multiple times throughout the year. So we can kind of see how students are responding in more real time to our interventions and supports that we put in place. So the first data point is our BAS benchmark, which is a Fountains and Mendel benchmark assessment. The BAS measures students' reading levels by assessing their accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. It is given one-on-one. It identifies students' instructional and independent reading levels using their text gradients, so it's like A through Z. One of the things to note about BAS, we use it for this comparison because we've been using it for many years, and we have a good comparison within our cohort, but it is one of the assessments that is no longer recommended for use because they found that it's pretty subjective, you know what I mean, and there's better ones out there that we've adopted since then that measure student progress. But I do feel like our data is very valid because we can compare our growth because we've been using it for the last couple of years. So just a few highlights. As you can see, all grades, with the exception of grade 5, show growth in literacy scores over the past 4 years, reflecting steady recovery from 2021, the post-COVID decline. Grades 1 through 4 showed strong and consistent results, with between around 20% more students meeting district benchmarks in 2024 than in 2021. Kindergarten was an outlier. Their scores do remain relatively flat across the 4 years. But like I said, this is just one part. It does measure just like text comprehension and leveling. And as you can see in the full report, not in this one, but students with disabilities consistently performed lower than their peers on the benchmark assessment, with the smallest gap existing in kindergarten and grade 1. This is something you can see in the full report. The Acadians Literacy Screener is a screener that we adopted about 3 years ago. Our first year usually is, we don't really use the scores because it is a time that we're still getting used to the platform. It was a very different way for us to assess. It was the first time we used an assessment that was given through an iPad, you know, so as teachers kind of, and it goes by very quickly because it's timed, so we didn't feel like the scores necessarily were as accurate as we were kind of learning the platform. But last year and this year, we're really comfortable with the platform now, and I feel like it's a strong comparison, so that's why we have a 2-year comparison. So the Acadian Screener measures early literacy and reading skills to assess student progress in foundational reading areas. So some of the areas it tests is phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, and vocabulary. Depending on the grade level, the older grade levels have a maze, which is like a reading passage that they have to interpret. So as you can see, student scores in Acadian Screener showed improvement across all grades between the spring of 2023 and spring of 2024. The largest gains were seen in grades 1 through 4 with over 20% more students falling in the meet or exceeds category. So one of the great things about this particular assessment, and the reason we adopted it, is that it not only gives you a baseline screener, which gives you great information about it, these literacy skills, but it also has a built-in progress monitoring. So teachers are able to take very immediate action, and the progress monitoring also measures student growth. So between the fall, winter, and spring assessment, there's progress monitoring that is done systematically. It's K through 6. And teachers, as they're providing the supports or literacy specialist interventions needed, we're able to then see how the student is responding to them, and then kind of adjust as needed. So that is a really great feature, and I think that it is done very strongly as part of our multi-tier system of support process that we have, and I do attribute a lot of our growth to us able to really identify specifically where students are struggling and really target the skills and then measure their growth. So in the full report, I just want to point out that students with disability earn scores in meeting or exceeding benchmarks across all grade levels. So they're still underperforming their peers with an average difference of 30%. Acadian Screener did identify more students with disabilities struggling to master grade level literacy skills than the BAS. So we're able to, because the screener, like I said, is more research-based, it's more systematic, we're able to identify better like where the students with disability need extra support. So, yeah. Moving on to our math benchmark assessment. So, excuse me, let me just get my notes. So our math benchmark assessment was actually district created. We found that the Go Math program didn't really give us the information that we were looking for. The way the program was set up is that it assessed end of year skills, but it was administered at the beginning of year and the middle of the year. So it really didn't help us, like we knew what the students didn't know because they haven't been taught, so we actually, the math specialist and I a couple years ago, and I've done this in other districts, we got together and we created our benchmark assessments. We use a various research-based questions. We looked through the math program and pulled out questions that we thought were really met the standards. So our benchmarks, each question is links to a standard, so teachers really know like exactly what are we measuring by this question. The benchmark assessment is administered mid-year and end of year. You have the end of year scores here. As you can see that kindergarten grade 1 remained consistently high with both grades. And again, you can see 2019, we just included that score so you can see our pre-COVID scores and how we are now faring in comparison 4 years later. Grade 1 showed solid improvement in 2024, jumping from 86% to 96%, which is the highest level in 4 years. And grade 2 remained relatively stable. If you look at our older grades, and that's something that Dr. Lardy kind of mentioned earlier, is that you can start seeing where the gaps are starting to grow. So with grade 5 really going from 70% to 50% in 2024. It is something that we are kind of looking into closely. We have really focused our supports for grades 5 and 6. We have our Title I grant that we were given. We have a part-time paraprofessional that works with our students, so she's able to really support and focus on the missed skills that grades 5 and 6 students have to be able to hopefully bring them up to speed a little bit.
And just to say, the Title I grant, we weren't given. Vicki applied for the grant and is filling out the reports, and we targeted and directed those funds to adding math support beyond the budget. So that was a recent addition. I think we finally hired someone in like November.
Yes, it's a difficult position to meet because you do need somebody that has some math background information, background experience in mathematics, because it's hard to say,
complex math
It's
concepts at
complex
that grade.
because you're not really teaching grade level skills, you're trying to backfill, so you kind of have to understand how a student progresses through mathematics and how gaps appear. So one of the things I talked about in our math review, that we are really looking for having a strong Tier 1 program, because, we always say you can't intervene yourself out of a not a very strong Tier 1, out of a Tier 1 problem, right? So we're really looking at a program that gives students more opportunities, like I said, to live in that conceptual area, where you can see a breakdown in grade 5 is because the standards are really huge, and there are so many new ones that are being introduced. Like if you look at the frameworks, they're like 5 pages. It's like the longest frameworks that you'll see out of any grade level, because there's so many, like everything that they've learned the previous 5 years is kind of begins in 5th grade, where they have to generalize information, now apply it to more complicated concepts. So if there's any gaps beforehand, that's where the student has a breakdown. And the same thing happens in middle school when they start getting to pre-algebra and algebra. When the student has breakdown, is because they didn't have those basic rudimentary algebraic skills and understanding. So they really have to understand how our numeric system works, and all that stuff to be able to generalize and apply it. So that's kind of our 2 focus areas, is when we're talking about filling in and looking for the new math program, is to really help our students kind of fill that gap. So the state measures for ELA MCAS, I know we did a full presentation, so this is just kind of a review. As you can see that we definitely have areas, like nobody wants to be at 50% in our ELA MCAS. Definitely an area that we need to focus on to kind of begin to continue the supports that we have kind of implemented. One of the things that is encouraging to see is that our Acadian scores are going up. We have a new ELA program that we are already starting to see skills being taught that students are showing mastery in that were gaps in our previous programming, So I do anticipate that in the next couple of years, we're going to start seeing our ELA scores increase, because we have a strong Tier 1 program. We have a strong MTSS process, which includes a really strong screener. We have a really good plan on how we are supporting students. We spend a lot of time looking at the data, making sure that we have a very concrete plan for when students do pop on the screener, how are we going to kind of meet their needs. So just wanted to mention. So one of the things I kind of wanted to break down and just take a little bit of your time is when we look at MCAS, you kind of see like the big general overview scores. But really this is kind of like the meat and potatoes when we're talking about how our students are actually doing. And these are key standards. And when we talk about key standards, these are standards that the students really need to have well-rounded mastery and understanding of to be able to show success as they kind of progress through our schools, through the grade levels. So the key kind of standards for ELA are really reading comprehension, vocabulary acquisition, written expression, which is like just basic your writing skills, and language conventions. And so I just wanted to show that I've looked over the last couple of years. These are 2 areas that we've actually really increased. Reading comprehension, as you can see, 82% of our students are there in the meets and exceeds category. This high-level mastery indicates that students can effectively identify main ideas and details, which help them tackle more complex literary and informational texts in the upper grades. Vocabulary acquisition is kind of self-explanatory, but 75% of our students are showing mastery. That's a trend up for us. One of the things that written expression is, you'll see that same thing's happening in grade 4 as well. That is an area that essay writing, and that's one of the areas where we really need to, we're focusing our time and our curriculum on as well, to be able to really, like the organization of ideas. So like written expressions, when they take the other skills and apply it, right? Because that's when you're asked to write an inference piece, you know what I mean? Or like talk about, so kind of brings a lot of different skills together. And then language and conventions, it's really is another area that As you can see, 70% of our grade 3 and 68% of our grade 4 students are showing and exceeding and meeting, but as we look at the upper grades, you do see that area kind of trend down because the skills are getting more challenging. So when we're talking about like where we're focusing our supports and our coaching for our teachers and looking at strong resources, like that's how we kind of identify which areas, which parts of our curriculum, like we're doing really pretty well, you know what I mean? Students are really mastering for the most part, and which areas we need to focus on more.
And I think also that drove part of the ELA adoption and program selection. We were looking for something. We knew a gap in our program was around language and written expression, and we're looking for a program that would have strong core instruction in that area.
So the same analysis for grades 5 and grade 6, you can see that reading comprehension and vocabulary acquisition, again, are on the higher end for our students. The majority of our students are in the meet and exceeds category. And this, of course, represents all students. And that written expression and language convention, again, is an area that you can kind of see a drop in with that really grade 6 is when they have to do like the big reports, and that's where we're kind of seeing like a bigger breakdown, you know. So the new program that we adopted, I've been talking to our grade 6 teachers, has a really strong instruction around this particular skill, you know, and it's actually quite rigorous, and I think we're a little bit taken back by how rigorous the new program is. So I think like our students are actually, because I think it's like the lessons are more rigorous, the expectations are higher, they're doing a little bit worse, you know what I mean? But we talked about how this is actually what we wanted, you know what I mean? Yep. So like once we start having our kids go through this program and they're building the skills from kindergarten, like you're gonna see the results in grade 6, you know? So, and the great thing about this program is that it has such a strong spiral. So not only within grade levels where the concepts are revisited, I think our previous one it was more taught in isolation, but like the spiral through the grade levels. Like we had Mr. Tarzik, our assistant principal, he said that he went to see a grade 3 lesson and he just happened to go to the grade 4 lesson, and he's like, I totally saw like the connection, you know what I mean? He was like, it was so neat, you know, so, yep. So
those, I guess, I don't mean to stop the momentum of your presentation. I've had a lot of questions, but are these MCAS scores for the okay, yeah. I'm trying to understand mathematically how 55% of grades 3 through 6, so in other words, 45% didn't meet or exceed. Yep. But all these numbers here show we're mostly meeting and exceeding.
So there's a lot of different standards that are measured in the MCAS. These are considered the power standards, critical standards. So there are other categories within there students may have underperformed, but these are the 4 like critical benchmark skills.
They have like this one, which like I said, this year they didn't release the questions so we can't look at them. But like for example, and it changes from year to year, but and like not saying again, like we definitely have areas we need to improve, like I'm not trying to excuse, but just they had a long essay as one of the things, and they had one question. And if a student didn't get that one question right, it showed that they had like 20%. But I feel like who I don't know, I guess it's a philosophy thing, but I'm like, if you're asked one question, you have like one chance to answer it correctly or not, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't assess a full array of skills, in my opinion, what like a long essay would, you know? So,
well, for an 11-year-old too.
Yeah, sometimes that can bring your score down. So there's like a lot of things that go into consideration, but the reason I pulled these out again is that because there's so many standards. I mean,
there's others here.
There's so many other ones, and like, not that the other ones are not important. Like we look at everything, but just for kind of to show for mathematics too, I'll go through it too. Like there's definitely specific standards that we know that like we really want our students to make sure that they really have strong foundational skills, because they're going to lead into their success into middle school and high school, you know, because those are the ones that build up. So everything is good to know, but you like not everything's weighted equally, you know.
Yeah, I'm just trying to connect in my brain, because I see the macro metrics say only 55% of our tested population met. standards.
Right.
But then this says we're doing really great, and this is like where we're strong.
And so I wouldn't, like, I mean,
yeah,
like 50% is not, like, I would love to see us all, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, previous, like, third, fourth, everything was beautiful,
Yeah, and
right?
our-
Mostly beautiful, mostly good. Here, yeah.
You can kind of see that.
I also think when you're thinking about that 55%, Peter, that metric, that's an average of all 4 grades. We're performing higher in third and fourth and lower in fifth and
Yeah,
sixth. So the domain standards are higher in the third and fourth grade than they are in fifth and sixth. So the fifth and sixth scores are definitely pulling down that overall.
And reading comprehension would have 10 substandards under it. So this is an average of all the 10 substandards. Well, I'm just saying 10 as an average. You know, they have different ones, but there's a whole drop-down menu, and it'll give you the individual standard. These are more like domains. They're like the overarching categories, you know, that you look. But if you break it down even further, you can kind of see even by standard, like which areas we have need stronger.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but that's included, I don't pour over my individual students' MCAS results because I tend to look more at kind of the holistic performance in the school year, but the report a parent receives breaks down those individual standards, correct? Like there's a whole bulleted list at the end of each section that says,
There is, like,
in mathematics, your algebraic reasoning, you got this many questions right.
Right. Yep.
In geometry, you
It
crushed
does.
it. You know, so you can assess individually each substandard.
You can,
Okay.
yeah. And like I said, when we look at students, especially like if you have a student that comes to our student support team, like, you know, like we kind of take a look at that, and we use our benchmark data the same way. We have it broken down by standards, so we can say that the student is really not getting the questions correct in like a number sense, you know what I mean, or whatever, you know. So we do kind of look at the breakdown of the measures, because you can kind of target and be like, okay, this is what we need to help with, you know. So just looking at the math too, again, this is just an overview, as you can see. In math, we've actually done a really pretty strong recovery from, we even surpassed our pre-pandemic scores. So especially in grade 3, grade 5, again, that's one of the areas that, as you saw in the benchmark scores, that we have a dip in our MCAS scores too. So one of the things that kind of gives us good measures that our benchmark scores are valid when you put them against the math MCAS, you know, so it is relevant measures. But we did kind of see a little bit of an uptrend from 2021, as you can see, to 2024. But that's definitely an area that we've been focusing on the last couple of years. We've been trying to target our specialists in those grade levels, really work with teachers to kind of help raise the scores and help support the students, which you can see a little bit of when you look at grade 6, the scores are higher. So you can kind of see that sometimes students need like 2 years to be able to really understand and master concepts.
And just to highlight that is consistent with state trends. State trends dip in grade 5 too. So.
You're right.
Specifically in math?
Yeah, in math, I believe ELA as well.
Yeah.
But
It's 5, 8 was the other one that they had, and 10, I believe, were the 3 like kind of big dips that the state has had over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I really appreciated your perspective on the math challenge for the 5th graders, because it's like a point in time where they're, like you said, conceptualizing everything they've learned.
Right.
You know. To what you mentioned with the ELA across BAS, the Acadians, and MCAS, 5th was the lowest performing
Right. Yeah.
class. What's happening at 5th grade for students that's kind of hitting them there on the ELA side?
So again, I think that does mirror the state trends, and again, you know, the level of rigor of the questions, the higher level critical thinking that they have to do, you know, comparing and contrasting text, abstracting author's message and intent. So they're more complex standards, and I think as a result, when we, you know, if our 5th grade was low and the state was not seeing that dip, we'd be more concerned. I mean, obviously we're concerned and we want to accelerate growth in that, but it does seem to be a year where a lot of standards and fundamental skills are now shifting from basic practices to more application.
Okay.
And that's a shift for our kids.
So it's kind of a jump on the
Yeah.
English side as well for
Yeah.
fifth
It
graders.
is, yeah.
Okay.
And like I said, fifth grade is kind of the year where a lot of things, you kind of have to
together.
really generalize, and then the standards really become a lot more rigorous, you know? So for, like, just give you a minor example in math. So in fourth graders are taught mathematics when they encounter decimals. They're taught as a fraction. So they're not even taught them as a place value. That we have a place value system of the decimals, like a tenths, you know. So they learn about decimals as fractions. They get to fifth grade, they're like, oh, by the way, decimals actually have a place value. You have to add and subtract with them. So there's like no transition that happens. So one of the things we're like when we look at our math instruction, we kind of try to give. That's what we're kind of looking for, a math program that will allow us to pace in these type of really important skills, you know what I mean? And that was a very minor example, but just to give you like the leap that it has, like it just doesn't make sense. Like you really need more time to unpack and understand that. But but the decimal, because fourth grade, that's not considered a major standard decimals, because fifth and sixth grade, I spend so much time, you might have like, you know, half a chapter on it, that's it, in the whole year. You know what I mean? And then you get to fifth grade and they're like, hey, you have to do all these operations with it, you know? So just like it's like very complex. That's how, so like when, but that's why like when we see an increase, that's why we kind of watch like how does sixth grade do in proportions, and reasoning is really an area that's actually a strength of us. So I feel like sometimes it's just like the kids need 2 years, you know what I mean? They just need more time to unpack and explore this mathematical concept, you know?
And I think also, Vicki, you talked about, and we have lots of educational jargon, so I don't know if everybody knows what we mean when we're saying we're looking for a program that spirals. So we had a unit-based program prior. So we studied fractions, and we learned fractions for this unit, and then it ends. And now we're going on to geometry and something else. And we don't go back to that.
Yeah.
So kids master it, and then they lose skills before it comes back up again. And in the new program, they were looking for a program that spiraled. So there was built-in review of those concepts, so the kids would retain it and be able to launch the following year. So that's something
Yeah.
I'm looking at too.
So we're looking for review and elevation. So we want to like to see if we can retain the skill taught in isolation, if we can apply it to a more complex situation, you know what I mean? And you remember, you know, and then we talked about those tools, is that like, what do you do if you come to a problem you don't know? Like, you know, most kids are just like, you know, but you like, you know, so that's what, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah. So just really quickly, I appreciate your time. So just really, I just wanted to break down just third and fourth grade. So again, this is some of the key standards we talked about: operations and algebraic thinking, numbers and operations in base 10. So that's really like your place value understanding. So like the concept that we have a base 10 number system, like, you know, that's like actually a pretty new concept for kids, you know, that they have to learn. And we take advantage of that as adults, because of course we know there's a base 10 number system, but like you try to introduce them to like the Mayan system, which is a base 12 system, blows their mind. They're like, what do you mean? You know, but just the fact that it is like a very specific reason why we have this place value system, and how do the numbers interact with each other and relate to each other. So operation algebraic thinking, which and numbers and operation base 10, our students are performing really strongly in across grade levels, which is really great because it's going to set them up for success when they get into the more complicated algebra and pre-algebra. And the reason I keep talking about middle school pre-algebra and algebra, and I've seen it with my own children, it is kind of like the pivotal time where kids either love math or they hate it for the rest of their life. You know what I mean? And it so much relies on their foundational understanding of mathematics, you know, and so that's why I always harp in talking about like algebraic thinking, algebraic skills, you know, it's because like I want them to have an easier path as they kind of move on. Word problem and applications, as you can see, multi-step word problems, that means that there's multiple parts, you know what I mean, that kids have to kind of solve for. That is an area that you'll see trending across the board that we really need to focus on, and that's again is something that we're really looking at. It's a generalization application of a lot of different skills. And you can see the same thing in fifth grade as well. So geometry and operational algebraic thinking, I'm really happy that we're trending with these numbers, but fractions and decimals and as you can see, ratios and proportional thinking, areas that we really need to kind of continue our focus on and the word problems. Before I move on to the town, are there any questions about this? Anything that didn't?
Why is, I mean, word problems clearly show throughout all the grades, but grade 6, I mean, especially if we think about the 2-year, ramp up from basics to more complex, like that 48 feels rough. Yeah, because I know it's only 2 less than 50, but it feels like
a lot of times, like 6th grade is kind of an interesting grade level overall, like to teach, like it's just like there's so much. There's 6th grade is another one that's like a pivotal shift for kids too, and really like problems around volume started being introduced, like the ratios problems, like the problem solving skills, and a lot of times. Stamina is a big thing. So it's not even that kids might not necessarily understand the concept. They don't have the stamina to sit through a problem long enough, especially one that they might encounter some struggle with. I'm sure watching your kids do homework in the upper grades, you can relate to that, but so like one of the things when we talk about like our mathematical practices, like what do we want to build, like when we talk about vision, like you have to start pretty young of building kids' resilience and being able to sit through and solve through a difficult problem, and that applies not only mathematics, that's like across the board, like read through a difficult passage, you know what I mean, without kind of giving up or kind of a lot of times kids give up because they're like, I don't know where to go with this, you know what I mean? And giving them those skills to be able to say, oh, I'm gonna try this. And if I fail, it's okay, I'm gonna try this, like that perseverance or resilience. So that's where I think a lot of our kiddos kind of struggle with, is just basically just being able to sit through and persevere and try a problem. Especially MCAS, like it's online. They have a piece of paper that they have to do their work problems. I can't tell you how many times the teachers and I go around and be like, use this piece of paper to solve the problem. Like we've even incorporated a couple of years ago into our curriculum opportunities for kids to solve problems online, and given them a piece of paper so they can have practice how to organize it, because you have to teach those skills, right? And so like when you have a problem, you have to write it out. And they're just like, I'm gonna do it in my head, just like punch in the numbers, so there's like a lot of, but like I said, if we have, hoping that like the programs we're looking at start building those skills early on, you know what I mean, just start building the stamina for kids. Yeah.
More spiral review and practice with those more complex problems.
That's a really great question. So the last part I just wanted to preface, I wanted to bring back the town comparison. So like as Dr. Lottie kind of emailed you, I recognize an error that I did when I did the MCAS presentation. I'm not exactly sure what happened with the other results. The only thing I can think of is I pulled the data too soon and the towns were not accurate. And what happened over vacation is that I was trying to figure out, one of the towns in my original report was like 80%, and I could not understand how a district had a 30% increase in 1 year. And I sent out a survey to all the districts, and I said, what are you guys doing? Like, give me your magic like solution, because I want to know. And I was like, it just doesn't make sense. So like I went back and I re-pulled the report, and I realized that's where I found that the numbers were not correct. So I readjusted them, and Norfolk fell in a very different place, which is, I guess, good news, right? So for ELA, like again, 55% is not something that is our target, but I do want to share that, as you can see over the years, we're actually trending right in the middle of where we are in comparison to our like districts. I did send out that survey. I'm going to look at the results. I did ask the other towns. It'd just be good for us to know kind of like what programs they're using, what supports they have in place. So maybe there's something that we can be able to look into for our district as well. And
what I would say with this too is that many of the other districts adopted new literacy programs prior to ours. So we're in the middle. A big part of that is that the MTS work, the other work, the Acadian Screener, the interventions we put in place, but we haven't seen the results of replacing a strong core program, which we expect to continue the upward motion.
Yeah, so like one of the things that I think we can kind of attribute to our educators and all the effort we put in is that without having a really strong core in the new program that the other districts have had, because they did adopt earlier, we were still not, at the bottom of the list, and that's definitely a big shout out to everybody. I just wanted to show in terms of pre-pandemic and post-pandemic numbers, just to kind of show like where the difference is. And as again, you can see for ELA, Norfolk has had a 12% difference in a drop in scores, but we fall about in the middle for that too.
So we're still clearly working on accelerating learning in
Right.
ELA.
For math, our numbers look a lot better than my first report. So as you can see, we're actually fourth from the top, just a little bit, and we're only like 3% and behind Concord and Sudbury and 6% behind Southborough. And again, most of these districts I know have adopted a new core program probably like a year or two ago. So this is really just, we're able to kind of keep up with all this curriculum adjustments that we're able to make and the efforts of our specialists and our teachers. And I think it's pretty promising that I think that even with the new core that we would be able to achieve even higher percentage. And doing the same thing, we actually have not had a big drop before the pandemic. As comparison to now, we're only a 2% drop, as you can see in comparison with the other towns.
So the recovery is happening faster in math for us than it is for ELA.
One other positive on both the ELA and, well, on both of these results is that a lot of the towns below us spend more per pupil than we do.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because we're doing a little bit more efficiently with our dollars in terms of the student achievement.
Absolutely. And I think, as Vicki said, I think a lot of the results that we're seeing, especially in math, there's been a tremendous amount of work done with the math specialists. Vicki has had a goal around really looking at math fact fluency, which is holding kids back because they're spending too much time on the computation and then they're losing that higher order thinking. So a lot of things have been put in place to maximize the impact of the resources we do have. So I agree with that. So just in summary, I feel we still continue to offer a strong educational program for all of our students. We have highly qualified, experienced teachers. Student attendance is high with below average rates of student discipline. Again, while we spend less money to educate students in almost all comparisons, our student achievement remains competitive. We made solid progress towards academic recovery. Our students outperform the state in most comparison communities in math. And then our ELA scores continue to improve, and we anticipate with the adoption of the new literacy program, we predict continued growth on future tests. So there's a lot more content in the report. We're trying to keep it, that was lengthy, but that's kind of the highlights that we wanted to address. And as we talked about with the budget, targeting additional math support for those upper grades, 5th and 6th, is aligned with our budget and our district goals. Continuing, because we are seeing growth in Acadians, we do predict that we're going to see the impact of that new program adoption. So any questions, happy to take, or?
It sounds like the kids in the lower grades, it sounds like they're really set up for success with the new ELA program, with the implementation of the new math program. It sounds like we have a great path forward for them. I am still worried about the kids in grades 3 through 5. Like you said, the gaps, and they will widen as we continue to build on things. I know you talked about spiraling, but what can we do for those kids who, 4th graders who maybe haven't mastered the skills they should have learned in 2nd grade? Like, how do you address that?
So I'm going to let you talk a little bit about, in more depth, about what MTSS looks like. But we are seeing at this point, our 3rd grade scores are pretty much above pre-COVID levels in ELA and math. So those kids, they were the least impacted because it's been a few years. 4th as well are pretty close to where we were. It's really 5th and 6th. But in terms of gaps, a couple of things have been happening. Anytime you implement a new program, there's always gaps that happen because kids haven't had the preceding years. I think one of the things that Vicki does a lot of work with our math specialists, one of who's in the audience tonight, is looking at that data and looking at, all right, I know you did launch units and developed units to address some of the skills that they may not have coming in or that they're expected to have that we know are gaps. We use pre-assessment early benchmark data to say, all right, some of these kids have these have missing skills in certain standards. So when they administer the benchmarks, when we're talking about MTSS, what that really means is that teachers are getting together to look at all of that student data, and it is by standard. So you might look at a whole grade level or a group of students and say, all right, these 5 or 6 kids really don't have the foundation they need in fractions or decimals. And then you design interventions. We're going to plan these 4 additional lessons and this content for these kids to target those skills. And when Vicki was talking about progress monitoring, through the electronic platform, we then check in. Are they now doing better on those skills? If not, we design additional interventions, and then we remeasure. So that's kind of how we're tracking kids' performance. So there's grade level things that we know are gaps that you've been working with the specialists to develop, additional lessons to supplement, and then we have individual student data that we use to design targeted interventions for those kids. Do you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that makes it a little bit challenging, like for mathematics, for example. So once we identify that a student has certain gaps, so our current program doesn't necessarily give enough differentiation resources. So our math specialists have actually built entire resource pages for teachers. Be like, all right, if a kid's struggling with this, here's some resources, here's some games you can play. But one of the difficult things of that is that it's yet another place that teachers have to go find and look for resources. And we know a teacher's day is just, maxed out. And even though the supports are there, it's much better when a program has a built-in, you know what I mean? So it's like one spot, everything is culminated, So that's why I think that, again, we will see that growth once we have that stronger core. But we do a really huge data analysis at the beginning of the year. The math specialist and I meet. We pull all of our student data from the beginning of year screener. We take the end of year results from the previous year and MCAS scores, and we basically do a student ranking system, where we kind of say, all right, who are our most needier students? So if a student is in 4th grade, which we really don't have that many students and are missing 2nd grade skills, that student right away goes and works with a math specialist. And what math specialists offer is they have years of experience with mathematics. They go to math professional development. They have a really high-level understanding of when a 4th grader is missing 2nd grade skills. It's not just pulling a worksheet. You have to really build in, and what does that look like, and how do you accelerate them, you know what I mean, so they're not falling further behind while they're learning skills from 2 years ago, so that's what these positions kind of bring the expertise in, So those students always see a math specialist, We don't have any students that I would say that are really that far behind that don't have support built in. We also work really closely with the teacher. So if they're going to see a math specialist, we give them resources like this, what they can work on during their win time, you know what I mean? And this is what they should be practicing and stuff. So they
clarify what win time is.
Win time is that what I need block. It's sorry. So it's Freeman Kennedy has it, is basically a dedicated half an hour that Lisa has built into the teacher schedule, where a student gets support and what they need, so it could be ELA, it could be math, it could be sometimes they get pulled by a specialist or a provider, or sometimes if a student is accelerated, they can practice, they're working on a project, so that's kind of what it's used for.
Are the specialist positions?
It's the worst. The legs on these tables are terrible. Sorry.
Both in ELA and math, with the scores slowly improving and the upper grades still down, with the budget constraints, are we adequately staffed specialist-wise, do you think?
Well, that's where we're trying to add additional math support for the upper grades, to support the 5th and 6th.
Right.
Students that require literacy support are able to access that, and again, our preliminary data, looking at the Acadian screener this year, we're seeing that upward trend. So having a program that addresses areas that were previously gaps, particularly in written language, language conventions, some of the phonics pieces, we are seeing those gains grow, but they do have access to literacy coaches and literacy supports.
They do, and our teachers, like I said, because we build in such a strong progress monitoring now, where teachers can really and we have dedicated time for teachers to be able to work with students in the classroom too, so we kind of look at how If a student is just a little bit below certain skill levels, a teacher will meet with them, they will work with them in small group, or sometimes pull them individually to build up that skill. And it's like repetitive. We have established, there's like a whole chart, a flow chart that teachers use that we've created a couple of years ago, where like if a student's struggling with this particular skill, this is how many times you should be meeting with the student, for this is a duration, this is how you're going to keep track. You know what I mean? If a student's not making progress, then they go to the student support meeting that we have, where it's a collection of our administrators, of our specialists, other educators, and we say, all right, like, what's happening? Why is this kiddo not making progress? And then the team kind of looks at all the data that's being pulled, that's been gathered, and they say, all right, the student might need more intense intervention. And then a specialist at that point, if they haven't been seeing the student already, will pick them up into a group, and then that's where they might do a little bit more intense, supports with skills that maybe have to go back a little bit further. But most of our students respond really well to classroom intervention, are able to go back to core instruction without needing support. And the system is so fluid, so like if you needed support in like one area and you kind of show growth and you're kind of chugging along, everything's going great, but then like, you might have another area that has popped up, you just go into the group, so students enter and exits all the time.
One question I had, and I'm thinking about the 5th and 6th graders again, and to your point about stamina, and kind of the age that they're at and some of the struggles they have with like sleep and energy. What about, time of day? One is time of day. I know like in my 5th graders class, they're doing an hour and 15 minutes as their very last session of the day. It can't be easy for kids at that age to be doing like one of the most intense topics, at the end of their day. They're hungry, they're whatever. But the other is more time. They probably need more time on these topics, as well as potentially breaking up the time throughout the day. So there's the brain rest and then activity around it, and then returning to it later again. I don't know. I mean,
we have one of the higher. We give I think I shared our breakdown with you before off the top of my head, but we have definitely in a higher end in how much we allocate for ELA and mathematics, and sometimes we're very also thoughtful of when we schedule because it's such a complex process that our principals have to go through. You have to fit in lunch and recess and specials, and and we're very large schools, so like trying to balance everything. But our ELA blocks are not. It's not all intense learning, you know what I mean? So like in the beginning, you might have a direct lesson that's being delivered. That's where afterwards you might do small group. The kids get movement, so you get to rotate through our centers. That's why we do a lot of central work in elementary. And then if it's towards the end of the day, sometimes teachers will do that's where you free read time, you know what I mean? That's when a teacher might pull a student to work with them on specific skills. So it's not like the intensity level is not all equal, We also try to keep our blocks more intact, because sometimes breaking up, like if you have a focus lesson and then you want to be able to follow up with practice, if that's broken up, that is very disjointed. Our upper grades sometimes have lunch later too, you know what I mean? So that's how there's a lot of different considerations that are put in. We try not to put math and ELA back to back. That's usually spread out too. And another consideration we have when we kind of schedule is that we try to give teachers partners, so they'll have another, especially when they're in new adoption, so they'll have another classroom that they can partner up with, which allows for teachers sometimes to teach concepts together or share students if they need for support. Also for our specialists to be able to support and coach classrooms and also support students. We can't have math all in the morning. You can't have 40 classrooms. We have 2 people, so, and our special educators too, their service mess. So there's a lot of considerations that go into, but I do feel pretty confident that the way, like I said, I've worked in many districts and we've tried so many different schedules. Even here, we have revamped our schedules, and we're probably going to relook at our ELA block again, because feedback is, a new program, but I feel pretty, comfortable with the way our programming is right now set up. I think kids are able to access
the math
it
as well.
Yes, and it's like, it's spread, it's,
You're okay with
it's-
some of the classes having it at the end of the day, the math?
Some of them, unfortunately, sometimes the classes have to, because we have math specialists, and if everybody has math at the same time, we can't get that support into the classrooms. Same with ELA, and also with our special educators. We have special educators that work with students in multiple grade levels, so if they're all having ELA at the same time, they can't pull. But what we do find, first of all, if later in the day, if it's after recess and they've had a movement break, kids come back in more energized. So we try to be thoughtful about that. Younger kids, their stamina fades throughout the day, so we try to put the core content earlier in the day and do specials later in the afternoon. So we try to do the best that we can with making sure that kids have cognitive movement breaks, and that the chunks of time are also uninterrupted. Because as Vicki said, if you have math and you have a half hour and then you have a break and you come back to it, there's a period of time that you lose in reorienting kids to what you were working on and catching up. So not perfect, but we do the best that we can to maximize core content lessons at times that make sense based on kids' developmental age, and leverage the staff that we have.
And our teachers have a lot of voice into scheduling making, like our specialists and our special educators, so it's really like we try to honor everybody's experience and expertise and needs, because they work with the age groups for many, many years. And so like when we do schedules, it's always like a team effort,
Yeah. Just thinking outside the box a little.
No, and I definitely.
Yeah,
think that-
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think they need more time with math and ELA, but that's an opinion of one.
It's hard to balance, because I think the ELA block is, 120 minutes? And then math is 90? Yeah, so, and then you have social studies and science and other core content, so.
In science, we want to give time to those great engineering units,
Yeah.
because that is also mathematics. It's like real-world example of mathematics and ELA. You know what I mean? It's just like that's where the kids get to really shine, and those problem-solving skills, like that's where they're able to showcase them and practice them. So like,
But
we have
science is adjudicated with an MCAS
time
too. It's
over
just
here, so
Yes.
like
done
120 minutes
Yes.
is a large block of the day, and then 90 for math is another large block. So we've tried to, as we said, try to keep those blocks connected so that we're not losing time and we're leveraging. But yeah,
Right.
I hear that.
we try to balance it. They talk about balancing and like readiness and this music and art, and like those are all key, as well. And would a couple more hours help us? Of course. Like we could
An
definitely make
extended,
it to
lengthened
good use.
school day.
It's just
We did add 10 minutes to the school day the last negotiations, but it hasn't rolled out exactly as we hope.
Right.
One of the ideas I had run by you, Ingrid, and I don't know if you have thoughts on this, is when I was looking through the Norfolk Rec brochure, I know one of the math teachers offers like a fun math-based
Yep.
program.
Yes, I
And I was
would
wondering
include
if there's any thought in doing more of that. Like I know 12 fourth graders whose parents would love a find the punctuation error class, like
Right,
once a
right.
week.
Yeah.
And maybe doing a little bit more academically based offerings, either partnering with teachers who are interested in running these groups or partnering with the rec. Just as like a once a week after school, you could do that. You could do like 20 powerful vocabulary words that show up in good essays, or just like little targeted.
We've done,
things.
book clubs are a common after-school thing. So REC has been a great partner with us in the past. I definitely think, there may be opportunities. We often do that in the summer, like fun math
The
camp.
summer fun math camp. That was always fun.
Yeah, but we can certainly talk with them. They've been responsive to areas of, supporting us with areas that we're interested in pursuing.
And even if teachers were interested in hosting like a group, like they could be like like a quest where you have to solve math problems with people, where it's just working on those skills that would be useful to.
There's a coding after-school program. They're doing coding, right, with Mark and...
They've done coding, they've done
That's been very popular, too.
Yeah.
They've engineered, stuff, So we could definitely, talk to Rec and see.
Additional. Yep. All right, so the baseline report we will have available on our website following this meeting, but we wanted to present it to you first. Next, we are, I think everybody's getting questions about the school calendar. So in your packet, you have a proposed school calendar. We have shared it with the Norfolk Teachers Association for feedback. It looks very similar to this current school year. I think the major changes are we want to shift one of our full professional development days to the start of the year before students start in order to be able to provide additional programming and professional development to support the implementation of the new math program. So we are suggesting moving one of the full professional days up earlier in the calendar. And what else is different on that? So that would give us 2 days for PD prior to school opening in August. And then we've really, over the past few years, been trying to work collaboratively with Rentham, Plainville, and KP to have some shared PD days, and that allows us to share costs for some mandated programming and also secure stronger and better presenters to come in because we're cost sharing. So we had talked about having some of these PD days as shared days in the calendar. Last day of school would be June 15th, snow date's June 16th through the 23rd. So pretty similar to this year, conferences around the same time. Again, the difference being in August, you see 2 PD days with student start day being on Wednesday, the 27th. So that's moving the day that we typically have in January up to before school opens.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, we're very excited about the shared PD days.
Yeah, that really
the
went
towns
well.
that we were able to do a shared PD day in this past November, where with Rentham, Plainville, KP, and teachers offered workshops, and people just could go and sign up for whatever workshop was of interest. So we had like probably over 60 workshops that we're able to offer.
Oh, awesome.
And we had like
That's great.
great responses, and people were asking for more of that type of, so it's nice that we have that.
Yeah. So just looking for a motion to approve the calendar. Once it's approved, we will send it out to all of our families and put it on the website.
I move to approve the proposed 2025-2026 school calendar.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Can I just ask, is kindergarten, is everything open the same day, or will that happen?
Nope, so the first day of school for students would be, let me check with Adrian, she should add it. Kindergarten would start
It has that weird
with
stagger.
the parent visit the first day, half the class the next day, and half the class the following week.
Okay.
So it'll be the same staggered start.
Same as usual, just
But
new
the
parents
day
might-
would still be the 27th. That would still be
Yeah, but it's a visit.
Right.
Yeah, and then they get, in the kindergarten information packet,
Yeah,
they'll get
it's like
the
a morning,
schedule.
afternoon, and then
Yep.
half and half. Yeah,
Yeah.
With a craft.
I have 3 of them hanging on my fridge.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Just 2 more items, and we're winding down. So quarterly bullying report per policy. In the last quarter, there was 1 report of potential bullying at the H. Oliver Day School, and at this time, it's currently under investigation. And then there was 1 report of potential bullying at the Freeman Kennedy School, which was investigated consistent with our protocol and our policies, and it did not meet the criteria for bullying. So obviously appropriate disciplinary measures were taken. We continue to provide comprehensive instruction in anti-bullying through Open Circle and Second Step, and we are seeing those numbers start to trend down. They were spiked post-COVID, so any questions on that? Okay. And then last, an update on the Bay State Shelter. I sent out a family communication last week. Currently, we have 52 students enrolled from the shelter. We're seeing a little bit of a shift. There's more students coming in the last group to the lower grades than there were at the upper grades. We do have 7 students scheduled to be moving out in the next week, so those numbers will go down, and we have fewer new students coming in this week. We have 3 that we expect to start on Monday. We're meeting regularly with the state to follow the plans for the Bay State. At this time, they are still reporting that it will be closing in June. They don't expect it to be extended beyond that. One of the issues we continue to work on is funding. So we had initially $104 a day per student from the shelter that was authorized in a supplementary budget, and the supplementary budget timeline is different than the regular state budget. So it expired in December, and it is now being discussed to renew and extend to next year. It is in the conference committee trying to resolve differences, but we are waiting for that information to come. Happy to take any questions people have. All right, I think that's it on my list.
For the baselines and benchmarks, I went through and it looks like a lot of Peter's questions were addressed, just the new aspirational goals. Is that something we're going to address at a future meeting?
We can. In response to that, we do have some goals that we've already have in place. So in my professional goals that I presented to the committee, they're 2-year goals. Last September, I have a goal around ELA improvement, and that goal was to improve achievement in the area of ELA as measured by a 4% increase in the number of students scoring in the meet and exceeds category by spring 2026, as well as a 4% increase in the Acadians reading composite scores, which would put us, move us up towards the top quarter. That goal was recognizing that when in the first year of an implementation of new program, teachers are still learning the program, so it's going to take a couple of years to start to see that accelerate. I also have a good gap narrowing goal, looking to increase performance of students with disabilities by a higher percentage, 5 to 6%, so that we start to close that goal. Vicki has a goal around mathematics, and that was to improve math fact fluency, because our data shows that's what's holding a lot of our kids back in those higher level skills, by 10%, and you've been working on that. And then we have a goal around supporting the implementation of the ELA program and adopting a new math program. So those are the existing goals in terms of accelerating COVID recovery and achievement. But I definitely think if the committee wants to talk about additional goals, we're already, I think, 3 percentage points away from, we're in the top quartile of our districts for math, and we expect that to go up with if we achieve the goal around fact fluency. So happy to do that. It might be a good idea for the school committee to set aside a full meeting to talk about goals if we want to do things further. But just wanted to share the goals that we currently have in place, and we do have strong goals in terms of accelerating that improvement. And you'll be able to measure those by next year's benchmark report. So, any other questions? I think we have some committee work.
I think we can possibly talk through this in the future.
Yep.
Yeah, I think those are wonderful goals that you outlined. I think looking at these reports, they're good, and there's kind of standalone metrics, right?
Yep.
But tying it together and kind of seeing where we Norfolk are headed and where do we want to be.
Yep.
Across it, maybe from a composite perspective of MCAS plus your benchmark metrics.
And I think the school committee can set goals, like district goals. These are just my personal, professional goals, but we can talk about district goals. I think that's a good conversation.
We'll put that on a future agenda. Moving on to committee and liaison reports, anything for policy?
We're meeting next.
Stay tuned, meeting after this meeting.
Budget, we
just updated. Unless you have any more, we're good, I think.
And the public hearing, March
12th. Or it's the Wednesday. I don't.
11th.
The 11th. Sorry. I'll be there.
Building committee.
So the building committee has met once since the unsuccessful election. Not all the members were able to attend, but we did meet and kind of debrief and discuss what the next steps for that committee might look like, and also what recommendations it might have in the go forward, because obviously while the project that was proposed was not approved by the town, the situation, as we discussed at the front end of this meeting, continues to exist and will continue to get worse in the coming years. So I think that the committee was of the consensus that a great next step would be for the school committee, in conjunction with the select board, to talk about another application to MSBA, which, if that was successful, would significantly change the kind of tenor of the project from a cost standpoint. It would extend the time frame, because you have to sort of go back to the beginning a little bit if you are invited to participate with MSBA, but it is certainly a worthwhile endeavor to undertake. I think those applications are due in April, and then a determination is made by MSBA typically by the August-September timeframe. So in the meantime, I think there would be, to an extent, a certain kind of lull in activity until we get some feedback from the school committee and the select board about whether or not an MSBA application is going to be submitted, and what possible next steps might be. And I mean, am I leaving anything out? I'm only reporting because Grace couldn't attend. So.
I think the committee also discussed that it might be valuable at this point to expand the committee and bring more community voices to the table
Yes,
as
definitely.
we are continuing planning efforts.
So you would need a vote on MSBA application at the next meeting?
Well, that is 100% the decision of the school committee and the select board. So the school
But we would
building
need to
committee
bring
has-
it to the
We would need
March
to bring it to
meeting
the March meeting.
for the committee to vote. So MSBA, there's no commitment just because you apply, you're not committed to the project. But in order to apply, the school committee and the select board have to vote to approve the district in applying for that. So we'd have to do it in March in order to meet the April timeline, and the select board would also have to do it in their March meeting.
KP, no major updates. We did do the retirement incentive that you talked about there. We voted that in.
Good.
Nothing major there. Liaisons, I'll just do the PTO really quick. Heritage Night was a huge success. 30 families shared something about their culture. There were over 300 attendees. We have adult and student trivia events coming up this month and an HOD movie night. The Growing Together fundraiser with the CPAC will be on April 5th and will be a Casino Royale theme, and the funds will go towards a sensory walk. And then they've also contributed to a number of curriculum enhancements, including the kindergarten puppet show, first grade sound workshop, third art quest, third force and magnetism, and the fourth art quest. And they just approved funding for a math technology program. So a lot of great work from the PTO. Any other liaison updates?
No. I think the rec just dropped their updated brochure. Just
There you go.
a shout out for summer programming, sign up for camp.
And then the new items, the minutes from our last meeting were included in your packet if you had a chance to review. I'd be looking for a motion to accept the minutes as written.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and then next meeting will be the public budget hearing on March 11th, followed by school committee.
Exactly.
All right, now, is there anything else from anyone? All right, just looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.